It's all about the employee experience, and I'll start there because happy employees equate to happy guests. And what hotel isn't striving to keep their guests happy? Because happy guests are loyal guests and often advocates of that particular property or particular brand. Loyalty then helps positively impact occupancy and ADR. So really, when you take a look back at happy and engaged employees, they truly are the foundation of a healthy hotel business.
This is Hospitality 1-to-1, conversations on the industry with your host, Chris Bennis.
Happy holidays from the Hospitality 1-to-1 podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. You can also check us out on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Hospitality 1-to-1. We are on Twitter at Hospitality 1-to-1. We also post video versions of our podcast on YouTube. Just search for Hospitality 1-to-1. And of course, you can find us on our website, which is www.hospitality1to1.com. We want to hear from you. Is there someone who you think we should be talking to? Let us know. You can email me at chris@hospitality1to1.com. Joining us today is Corey McCarthy, Vice President of Marketing for the digital workplace app Beekeeper. Corey has spent nearly 20 years in the hospitality industry, serving as Associate Publisher of Lodging Hospitality Magazine, Vice President of Sales at Hotel Interactive, and founder of Testarossa Marketing. She has extensive insights into all facets of the hotel business. And now, Corey McCarthy. Corey, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to speak to us.
Chris, thank you so much for having me.
So, obviously you've got a very impressive background, and you have a unique service that many people may not know of, and we want to kind of get into that, and we'll talk more about Beekeeper in a few moments. But I first want to kind of pick your brain, if we could. You have an amazing background in marketing. How do you feel that hoteliers handle their marketing when it comes to being an employer of choice?
It's interesting. Most of the marketing that I've seen from the hotels is relatively good. One of the trends that I've seen more recently is hoteliers showcasing their employee-facing technology, and they're doing this to attract younger hotel workers.
So you've been in and around the hospitality industry for many years. So in your opinion, what is the most alarming issue facing hotels?
In my years in the hotel industry, I've always noticed that hoteliers are relatively slow to adopt to technology. And so one of the most alarming things, I think, for 2018 in the hotel industry is the lack of awareness regarding GDPR. GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation that the EU is rolling out in May of 2018. And I don't think that most hoteliers in the U.S. are aware that it exists or aware that it can significantly impact their business. The whole idea behind GDPR is to protect European residents' personal data, whether it's flowing within Europe or flowing from Europe to the U.S. Back in 2016, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the EU agreed on an act called U.S. Shield. And what U.S. Shield does is it protects that personal data coming over from Europe. What it further does is it makes all of the U.S. companies accepting personal data coming over from Europe liable to the GDPR standards and regulations being set forth. It also means that any company in the U.S. that's accepting and handling data from a European citizen would be able to be tried in a European court under the GDPR regulations. It's a pretty significant fine. Fines are up to $20 million or 4% of their global annual revenue.
Wow.
So I don't know if you remember a few years ago when Google got in trouble for some data breaches over in Europe. If that would have happened to Google under the GDPR laws, it would have been an astronomical number that Google would have had to pay out. So the European Union means business with this, and being that the hotel industry is supported by travel and tourism, it will significantly impact more hoteliers than I think they realize. So it's a very important thing that's happening that is a potential risk to those who remain uneducated.
And you talk about the GDPR. How is Beekeeper helping hoteliers handle this monumental responsibility?
So hoteliers and companies in general need to make sure that every piece of technology within their tech stack is GDPR compliant. And so Beekeeper is based both in Zurich and in San Francisco. Because we're based in Zurich, GDPR is a requirement that we're paying very close attention to, and we've been working on for the past 9 months. At this point, it's looking like we'll achieve our GDPR compliance in January. So this is important because a lot of hoteliers are using communication tools that are more geared for the consumer set, like WhatsApp. WhatsApp is not GDPR compliant. And so if there's any guest data that's being shared over the WhatsApp streams currently being used in a lot of hotels, they'll find themselves not in compliance. So using a tool like Beekeeper will help ensure that as they grow their tech stack and audit their tech stack for GDPR compliance, Beekeeper would be able to fill that void for them.
And you're offering a checklist, if you will, to hoteliers to help to make sure they're GDPR compliant, correct?
Yes. Our Vice President of Risk had put out and published the same list that he used to make sure that Beekeeper is compliant.
Wow. And how can people get that checklist?
Is there a link that we can supply? I'm more than happy to make that available for your listeners.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic. And if we can kind of walk it back for a second, since, you do work in the industry and are entrenched in the industry, what do you see as the biggest need for managers when it comes to touching frontline employees? In other words, you'll have hotels in particular that, large or small, it's imperative that managers are in constant communication with all staff, large and small. How do you feel it's important, or what tools can be utilized that each manager can touch each employee?
Reaching every single employee is incredibly important. Employee satisfaction relates directly back to guest satisfaction. So maintaining open and clear lines of communication with all employees at any given time is paramount, and often something that's challenging at a hotel property just because of the makeup of the shift schedules and the dispersed employees without computers or email addresses. So really, how do you communicate with those employees? One of the things that's great about the Beekeeper platform is it's an intuitive-to-use mobile app that connects departments. It connects the general manager to the rest of the team. It also allows for peer-to-peer communication. So if there is if there's a housekeeper that needs to swap a shift, he or she can easily text or message one of their peers within our app to see if they're available to take over that particular shift.
So it's more like an intranet social media tool.
It replaces an intranet. It acts similarly to a social media tool, but it's a lot more robust from that. From the organizational point of view, there's a pretty robust analytics dashboard behind it. So you can actually see how many employees are engaged, how many employees are using the tool. You can do surveys, read receipts for various safety updates. It's a lot more than just an intranet or just a social media tool.
Now you've talked about it a little bit already, but I want to kind of break it down a little bit. I mean, how do you see Beekeeper positively affecting the industry?
It's all about the employee experience, and I'll start there because happy employees equate to happy guests, and what hotel isn't striving to keep their guests happy? Because happy guests are loyal guests and often advocates of that particular property or particular brand. Loyalty then helps positively impact occupancy and ADR. So really, when you take a look back at happy and engaged employees, they truly are the foundation of a healthy hotel business.
Now, you are expanding Beekeeper, if you will, to a much larger level when it comes to knowledge, because obviously you talk about happy employees, and happy employees, of course, walks up to successful managers. And to be a successful manager, you have to have the knowledge. And I think that kind of takes us into the B School. Can you talk a little more about B School?
Absolutely. One of the great things that we do at Beekeeper is education. We take that very seriously. We feel that if we can create a situation and a culture within each of our clients of open communication, we can help each one of them be better managers. B School was one of my brainchildren. Dr. H was my organizational behavioral management professor when I was getting my MBA. And it was funny because when I was first diving into everything having to do with Beekeeper, I kept going back to my course notes from that particular class to drive a lot of the great blogs and white papers that we're writing right now. And I thought to myself, well, why don't we just teach this as she taught it to our MBA cohort and open an MBA style course up to not only Beekeeper clients, but also the industry as well. So the professor agreed to do that with us, and it has turned into a very successful B School series. We have the first series of 6 courses that launched last week. We're gearing up for our 3rd course coming up next Tuesday.
And what are some of the courses they can enroll in?
They can enroll in the entire course, and they'll learn about professional engagement, culture, national differences, and how that impacts how you manage, motivation, and employee engagement. Now,
from what I understand, you've got a pretty generous price for this course. Is that correct?
Yes, it's everyone's favorite 4-letter word, free.
So if someone's listening and they are inspired to be part of the Beekeeper course, the B School, how would they enroll?
You can enroll at beekeeper.io/B-School.
That's
spelled BEE.
BEE. So we've talked a lot about Beekeeper when it comes to in the hotel industry, but if someone happens to either have a side business or comes from an industry that may not necessarily be hotels, can Beekeeper be applicable to other industries? If so, what kind of industries might be a good fit for this application?
Absolutely. We do quite a bit with retail. Wireless Vision is the largest mobile phone retailer in the United States. They've adopted the Beekeeper system within their organization, and they do phenomenally well with it. When you take a look at a retail organization, the success of retail employees and the amount of sales that they are able to achieve directly correlates back to the amount of information they're given on the sales floor. And that's usually a big gap within a retail organization that Beekeeper is able to solve for, because we can allow corporate to send each individual store messages about new shipments coming through, new products that'll be available, new plans, or any sort of marketing promotions that are being pushed out to the client, to the consumers. Restaurants are also a fantastic place to use Beekeeper. The Serrano Hotel here in San Francisco has been using Beekeeper in their restaurant, and they found that it's been much easier to run the operations since implementing Beekeeper because of all of the shift swapping that happens and the various scheduling difficulties or challenges that are inherent to the restaurant business.
Now, I also, from what I've read, Beekeeper has actually proven to be a lifeline for hotels in the case of natural disaster. I know with Hurricane Irma, when it hit South Florida, one hotel, South Beach, utilized it as a invaluable tool for its employees. Would you care to speak more about that?
Absolutely. One hotel, Intercontinental Hotels, we have a few properties down in South Beach. They use Beekeeper in a lot of interesting ways. Within the Beekeeper platform, part of the robust backend that I was talking about before, we have something called a worker bee, where you can pre-populate communication threads that would be sent out at the push of a button. So you can pre-plan for a lot of crises, whether it's a terrorist attack, a natural disaster, or a power outage. You can have pre-populated messages ready to go that somebody back in the corporate office would automatically push out to the entire organization or to specific departments. You can do safety checks, so you can send a message to the entire organization or a specific department, asking everybody to respond with a red receipt, confirming that they are indeed safe. You can also give property information. When we were speaking with one hotels, they used the Beekeeper platform after the hurricane had passed in order to keep their employees up to date on when the hotel would be reopening and when they should plan on being back at the property.
So it was really a lifesaver, a lifeline that let different people communicate. One of the features I've noticed about this tool is it also bridges not only the geographic gap, but also the linguistic gap as well. Is that correct?
It is. We have inline translations. It was interesting. The Hilton Anatole in Dallas is one of our clients. When they rolled out Beekeeper, there was a housekeeper that only speaks Vietnamese. She had been traveling into work 1 hour one way every week just to check her schedule. So round trip 2 hours, and that was 2 hours away from her family. She had to find childcare, and it was a major pain point in her life that nobody realized. So when they told her that she could check her schedule using the Beekeeper platform, she almost cried tears of joy. She was so excited. She jumped up and down, and this was a major pain in her life that was solved. So that was fantastic. Also, we do have the inline translation. So she can choose Vietnamese as her native language, and any of the messaging that's coming through the app will be translated specifically for her. There's another great story that came out of Mandarin Oriental. There was a gentleman within their staff who was deaf, and once you put the platform in his hands, all of a sudden a smile broke out on his face and the guy went crazy. The first thing he texted was, "Now I have a voice!" Exclamation point, exclamation point. I guess everybody in the room was just in tears. It was such a happy moment because now finally he could communicate with the rest of the staff, and he was posting pictures of his kids and jokes and just constantly communicating with everybody. It was as though this, wild personality had all of a sudden been unleashed. So it was a very heartwarming thing for that property to go through an experience.
Truly an international communication tool.
It is.
So in the old way of thinking, in many places when you went to work, the cell phone went in the locker or had to go in your pocket, and you were never to have it out during working hours. But obviously with Beekeeper and its multi-platform capabilities, be it on a PC, be it on a laptop, be it on a cell phone, it now encourages mobile communication. So how has that impacted the hospitality industry or other industries as well?
Their employees are certainly happier and more engaged. One Hotels does a morning huddle, and it was interesting because when we were there on site and were part of their morning huddle, each and every single one of the employees had their cell phones out while the manager was talking, and they were looking online through we were in the housekeeping huddle, they were going through the housekeeping stream, reviewing everything that the manager was talking about. So for the first time, rather than just hearing it, they visually got to see what the manager was talking about because they could follow along on their phones and refer back to it than when they were in the middle of their day and a question came up. So it's definitely been made more acceptable for employees to use their phones, and it has definitely increased the level of communication between hotel staff. It has definitely created some operational efficiencies and is now a welcome sign. One hotels had mentioned to us that after using the Beekeeper platform, they couldn't imagine life without it anymore. Going without Beekeeper would actually be like taking 5 steps back, and a real setback for any organization.
Now, if you're a current hotel that has an existing platform of software, be it HR, budgeting, whatever it may be, Beekeeper can talk to that in most cases, correct?
That's correct. We have our system set up as an open API, which means that we can interface with any other system that also has an open API, so the two systems can communicate back and forth with one another and exchange information in real time.
This is fantastic. And, one of the stats I noticed up on your website was that 83% of the employees out there worldwide do not sit behind a desk. Is that correct?
2 billion non-desk workers, yes.
Oh, my goodness. So we look at a number of hotels. You have both the large full-service properties and the smaller boutique hotels. Just to be clear, with the robust nature of Beekeeper, this isn't just meant for the large conglomerate properties. The smaller, family-run hotels can utilize this as well, correct?
Absolutely. Beekeeper was built to be an intuitive and easy-to-use platform. The key to Beekeeper is its simplicity. We see a lot of very small properties using us, and the property use cases are fantastic, whether it's the front desk communicating with the housekeeping staff to make sure that guest check-ins go smoothly, or whether it's housekeeping communicating with maintenance, sending a picture of something that's broken down to maintenance so that maintenance is immediately alerted and can come up and fix it. To the general manager distributing property-wide information across all of the different hotel shifts. It's really been a game changer at the property.
Now, you were talking about ease of use. If you're a smaller hotel in particular, don't have a large and diverse IT team, how difficult is Beekeeper to integrate or get set up with your hotel or other business for that matter?
We have a fantastic customer success team here that helps get most of our clients set up. From the back end, the interface is very intuitive. I am mildly techie. I can get into the back end and do anything that I need to do. It's very easy. It just simply makes sense. So you don't have to have a background in tech. You don't have to really be that techie in order to maximize Beekeeper at the property level.
Now, let's talk about price if we can, and it may be a generalization, but on average, what can a hotel or a business expect to pay for the Beekeeper platform?
Depending on the size of the property, and the bigger the bigger the property, the better it gets. But typically, our pricing structure is between $2 and $5 per person per month.
Very reasonable price. I guess my last question for this conversation would be: we look at the benefit for the employee, we look at the benefit for the employer. Speak to, if you can, the bottom line. How can Beekeeper truly benefit the guest when they walk in and that guest experience?
Well, the guest experience really starts with the employee. The first person that you see when you walk into a hotel is usually the person behind the front desk when you check in. And that person's energy, that person's mood can really make or break a guest's experience or relationship with the property. So by treating your employees well, making sure that your employees are engaged, informed, and well taken care of, you really have walking ambassadors of your brand at every step along the way. So anybody that the guest would meet or have an interaction with would all be on brand, for lack of better words.
What a great conversation, Corey. Beekeeper seems like it's an amazing application. If people want to learn more about Beekeeper and how it may benefit them, how can they get a hold of you?
The easiest way is to go to beekeeper.io/hotel. We've got a lot of great information, including our contact information there. People can schedule a demo and meet our great staff.
Fantastic. Again, Invaluable information. Thank you so much. Rest assured, we are going to actually post the link that Corey's talking about up on our hospitality1to1.com website. Corey, I know you're quite busy. Thank you for carving out some time out of your day.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Hospitality 1-to-1 podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. You can also check us out on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Hospitality 1-to-1. We're on Twitter at Hospitality 1-to-1. We also post video versions of our podcast on YouTube. Just search for Hospitality 1-to-1. And of course, you can find us on our website, which is www.hospitality1to1.com.